Lee Hyun pushed his cleaning cart down the long, shining hallway of the Imperial Wing. The wheels made soft squeaking sounds on the polished floor. It was past midnight, and the space station was quiet except for the low hum of the engines. Hyun had been cleaning these halls for 3 years now. Every night he mopped floors, emptied trash bins, and wiped down surfaces that cost more than most people made in a lifetime. The alien nobles who lived here never looked at him. To them, he was just another human worker, barely worth noticing. The Valdorian Empire ruled over hundreds of worlds and dozens of alien species. At the top were the Valdorians themselves, tall, blue-skinned beings with silver eyes who thought they were the smartest creatures in the galaxy. Below them came other alien races, each with their own rank and status. At the very bottom were the humans. Hyun didn't mind being invisible. It made his job easier. While he cleaned, he listened to conversations in different alien languages. Over the years, he had learned to understand Valdorian, Kellian, and 3 other alien tongues. But he always pretended not to know anything. Smart humans kept their heads down and did their work. Tonight felt different, though. As Hyun cleaned the outer rooms of the Imperial quarters, he could hear raised voices from deep inside the Emperor's private area. The Emperor was arguing with someone about trade routes and rebel planets. Hyun recognized the voice. It belonged to General Dartek, the Emperor's military advisor. "The humans on Kepler 7 are causing trouble again," the general was saying in his rough Valdorian accent. "They refuse to work the mining stations." "Then make them work," came the cold reply. Hyun knew that voice too. It belonged to Emperor Kang Woo-jin, though most people just called him Emperor Kang. The Emperor was different from other Valdorians. He was shorter and his blue skin was lighter, almost gray. Some whispered that he had mixed blood, but no one dared say it out loud. "The humans are weak but stubborn," General Dartek continued. "They would rather die than submit." "Then let them die," the Emperor said. "There are plenty more where they came from." Hyun kept cleaning, but his hands tightened on his mop handle. He had family on Kepler 7. His sister worked in those same mines the general was talking about. But there was nothing he could do. Humans had no power in the Empire. They were just tools to be used. The voices moved away, and Hyun continued his work. He cleaned the fancy sitting rooms with their floating chairs and walls made of rare crystal. He emptied trash bins that were probably worth more than his yearly salary. Everything in the Imperial Wing was designed to show power and wealth. As he worked his way deeper into the quarters, Hyun noticed something strange. There was a door at the end of the main hallway that he had never seen open. It was different from the others, older looking with strange symbols carved into the metal. Tonight, there was a thin line of light coming from underneath it. Hyun had been told never to go near that door. It led to the Emperor's most private rooms, places where even high-ranking officials were not allowed. But as he got closer, he heard something that made him stop and listen. It was a soft sound, almost like crying. But it wasn't human crying. It was something else. Something that sounded hurt and lonely. Hyun looked around the empty hallway. His shift supervisor, Park Min-ho, was cleaning the lower levels tonight. No guards were in sight. The sound came again, weaker this time. Whatever was making that noise was in pain. Hyun's mother had always told him that helping others was the most important thing a person could do. Even when the world is cruel, she used to say, we must choose to be kind. Those words had gotten him in trouble before, but he couldn't ignore them now. He moved closer to the door and pressed his ear against the cold metal. The crying sound came again, followed by a weak chirping noise. It reminded him of the baby, birds that used to fall from their nests back on Earth. His mother would always make him help put them back, even when his father said it was useless. Hyun checked the time on his wrist device. He still had 4 hours left in his shift, and this section was supposed to take him 2 hours to clean. If he was quick, no one would notice if he was a few minutes late. He pulled out his maintenance card, the one that gave him access to most areas of the station for cleaning purposes. His hands shook as he held it near the door scanner. This was crazy. If he got caught, he would be thrown off the station or worse. But the crying sound came again, weaker than before. The scanner beeped softly and the door slid open. The room beyond was unlike anything Hyun had ever seen. It was circular, with a high ceiling that showed the stars outside through a clear dome. The walls were covered in gold and silver decorations that seemed to move in the dim light. But Hyun barely noticed any of this. In the center of the room was a large glass case, and inside the case was the source of the crying. It was small, about the size of a house cat, with scales that shimmered like jewels. It had tiny wings that fluttered weakly, and its long neck ended in a head with large, sad eyes. Hyun had seen pictures of dragons in old Earth stories, but this was real. This was a baby dragon, and it was dying. The little creature looked up at him with eyes full of pain and loneliness. It let out another weak cry, and Hyun felt his heart break. This beautiful, magical being was trapped in a glass prison, slowly fading away. Hyun looked around the room again. There were feeding dishes, but they were empty. There were expensive toys, but they looked untouched. Someone had put this dragon here and then forgotten about it, left it to die alone while they talked about trade routes and killing humans who wanted freedom. The dragon made another sound, softer now. It was giving up. Hyun made his decision. He couldn't walk away and pretend he hadn't seen this. His mother's voice echoed in his mind. Even when the world is cruel, we must choose to be kind. He was just a human janitor, the lowest of the low in the great Valdorian Empire. But sometimes being low meant you were the only one who could see what others missed. Sometimes being forgotten meant you were free to do what was right. Hyun stepped closer to the glass case, and the baby dragon lifted its head to look at him. For the first time in 3 years, Lee Hyun was about to do something that mattered. The glass case had a simple electronic lock, the kind used on supply closets throughout the station. Hyun's maintenance card opened it with a soft click. As soon as the case opened, the baby dragon lifted its head higher and made a sound that was less crying and more like hope. Hyun reached in slowly, not wanting to scare the little creature. Up close, he could see how thin it was. Its scales, which should have been bright and colorful, were dull and faded. Its tiny wings drooped like wilted flowers. "Hey there, little one," Hyun whispered in his native Korean, then switched to simple Valdorian. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." The dragon's large eyes focused on his face. There was intelligence there, real understanding. This wasn't just an animal. This was a thinking, feeling being that had been suffering alone. Hyun gently picked up the dragon. It weighed almost nothing, like holding a bird made of air and starlight. The dragon didn't fight him. Instead, it curled against his chest and made a soft purring sound that vibrated through his uniform. Looking around the room, Hyun saw what was wrong. The feeding dishes contained a gray paste that smelled artificial. The water bowl was clean but empty. Everything in the room was expensive but cold, meant to impress visitors, not to care for a living creature. Hyun had grown up on a farm before his family moved to the city. He knew that young animals needed warmth, food, and most importantly, they needed to know they weren't alone. This dragon had none of those things. The dragon looked up at him with those large, trusting eyes, and Hyun felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt needed. "I'll be back," he promised, gently placing the dragon back in its case but leaving the lid open. "I have to finish my work, but I'll come back before my shift ends." The dragon made a small sound that might have been understanding. Hyun spent the rest of his shift thinking about the dragon instead of focusing on his cleaning. He almost mopped the same floor twice before catching himself. His mind raced with questions. What kind of dragon was it? Why was it in the Emperor's private room? And most importantly, how could he help it without getting caught? When his shift was nearly over, Hyun made his way back to the forbidden room. The dragon was exactly where he had left it, but its eyes followed him as soon as he entered. This time, Hyun came prepared. He had brought a small container of warm soup from the yard, workers' cafeteria, and a bottle of clean water. He also had a soft cloth from the cleaning supplies. Not much, but better than the cold glass case. The dragon drank the water eagerly, making happy chirping sounds. It was less interested in the soup, but it ate a little bit. Mostly, it seemed, to want Hyun's attention. Every time he stopped petting it, the dragon would nudge his hand with its small head. "You're lonely, aren't you?" Hyun said softly. "How long have you been in here by yourself?" As if understanding his question, the dragon made a long, sad sound. Hyun spent an hour with the dragon before he had to leave. When he put it back in the case this time, the dragon tried to follow him. It broke Hyun's heart to see those small claws scraping against the glass as he walked away. The next night, Hyun came back again. This time he brought better food, some fish from his own dinner and fresh fruit he had bought with his own money. The dragon ate more this time and seemed stronger. Its scales were a little brighter, and it held its head higher. "I've been thinking about a name for you," Hyun said as the dragon ate from his hand. "How about Spark? You're small, but you're bright and warm, like a spark of fire." The dragon looked at him and made a sound that Hyun chose to interpret as approval. This became their routine. Every night after finishing his official cleaning duties, Hyun would visit Spark. He brought food, fresh water, and most importantly, companionship. He would talk to the dragon in Korean, telling it about his day, about Earth, about his family. Spark grew stronger each night. Its scales became more colorful, deep blue and green with hints of gold. Its wings, though still small, fluttered, with more energy. But the biggest change was in its eyes. The sadness was fading, replaced by curiosity, and what Hyun was sure was affection. After 2 weeks of secret visits, Hyun realized he had a problem. Spark was growing. The dragon that had been the size of a cat was now closer to the size of a small dog. Soon it would be too big for the glass case. Worse, it was becoming more active and making more noise. Someone would notice eventually. His worry grew when Park Min-ho started asking questions. "You've been taking longer to clean the upper levels," Min-ho said one night as they prepared their equipment. Min-ho was older than Hyun and had been working on the station for 7 years. He was careful and suspicious of anything that might get them in trouble. "Just being thorough," Hyun replied, trying to sound casual. "Be careful, Hyun. The supervisors have been asking about efficiency reports. If they think you're slacking off, they'll replace you with someone else." Hyun nodded, but his mind was on Spark. He couldn't abandon the dragon now, not when it was finally getting healthy. But he also couldn't risk losing his job. Without work, he would be sent back to Earth and Spark would be alone again. That night, when Hyun visited Spark, the dragon seemed to sense his worry. It nuzzled against his hand and made soft, comforting sounds. For a moment, Hyun could swear. He felt something in his mind. A warm feeling that wasn't his own. A feeling of gratitude and friendship. "I don't know what to do, Spark," he admitted. "I want to help you, but if they catch me, I'll have to leave you forever." The dragon looked at him with those intelligent eyes, and again Hyun felt that strange warmth in his mind. This time, it felt like understanding. Like the dragon was trying to tell him that it knew the risk he was taking. As Hyun prepared to leave that night, he heard footsteps in the outer hallway. His blood turned to ice. No one should be in this section at this time of night. Quickly, he put Spark back in the case and closed the lid, but left it unlocked. The dragon seemed to understand the danger and stayed very still. Hyun grabbed his cleaning supplies and slipped out of the room just as the footsteps came closer. He managed to look busy, cleaning the hallway when 2 Imperial guards walked past. They didn't even look at him, just another invisible human worker. But as they passed, Hyun heard one of them say, "The Emperor wants extra security on this level. Some of the artifacts have been disturbed." Hyun's heart pounded as he continued cleaning. They were getting suspicious. He would have to be even more careful, or his secret visits to Spark would come to an end. And if they discovered what he had been doing, it wouldn't just be his job at risk. In the Valdorian Empire, humans who disobeyed orders often simply disappeared. But when he thought about Spark's bright eyes and the way the dragon had looked at him with trust and affection, Hyun knew he couldn't stop. Whatever the risk, he wouldn't abandon the only friend he had made in 3 years of invisible labor. HFY, Dragon was counting on him, and Lee Hyun had never let anyone down when it really mattered. 3 weeks into his secret visits, Hyun began to notice something strange happening between him and Spark. At first, he thought he was imagining things. Sometimes, when he was cleaning other parts of the station, he would suddenly feel happy, for no reason. Other times, he would feel a deep loneliness that wasn't his own. The feelings were strongest when he was near the Imperial Wing, and they disappeared completely when he was far from it. It took him several days to realize the truth. Somehow he was feeling Spark's emotions. When Hyun arrived for his usual visit that night, Spark was waiting by the glass case door, which Hyun always left unlocked now. The dragon had grown again, and was now the size of a medium dog. Its scales shimmered with health, and its wings had developed beautiful patterns of blue and gold. "Hello, my friend," Hyun said softly, and immediately felt a warm wave of joy that definitely wasn't his own emotion. Spark chirped happily and climbed onto Hyun's lap as he sat cross-legged on the floor. The dragon had become more affectionate, over the weeks often curling up against Hyun's chest like a cat seeking warmth. As Spark settled against him, Hyun felt something new, not just emotions, but something like thoughts. Not words exactly, but feelings and images that made sense in his mind. He saw himself through Spark's eyes, not as a lowly human worker, but as someone important, someone who cared. He felt Spark's gratitude, deep and pure, and something else that made his eyes water. Love. The dragon loved him. "I can feel what you feel, can't I?" Hyun whispered, gently stroking Spark's head. "And you can feel what I feel too." The dragon made a soft sound and nuzzled closer. Through their strange connection, Hyun sensed agreement. Over the following nights, their bond grew stronger. Spark began sharing more than just emotions. Hyun started to understand things about the dragon's nature that he had never known before. Dragons, he learned, were not just magical animals. They were highly intelligent beings with their own language and culture. Spark was young, barely more than a baby, but it carried ancient knowledge in its blood. And dragons, Hyun discovered, could only survive if they had an emotional bond with another intelligent being. This was why Spark had been dying. The Emperor and his people had treated the dragon like a rare object to be displayed, not a living being that needed love and companionship. "Where did you come from?" Hyun asked one night as Spark rested in his arms. Through their connection, Spark shared images and feelings. Hyun saw a beautiful world with crystal mountains and lakes that reflected rainbow light. He felt the warmth of other dragons, a whole family that had loved and protected Spark. Then came darker images, ships with Valdorian markings, weapons, and the terrible loneliness of being taken away from everything familiar. "They took you from your family," Hyun said, anger rising in his chest. Spark shared more images. The dragon had been given to the Emperor as a gift by some alien diplomat trying to win favor. No one had bothered to learn how to care for a dragon. They had simply put it in a beautiful cage and expected it to survive on food pellets in isolation. "But you're not alone anymore," Hyun promised. "I'll take care of you." Spark's response was a wave of pure trust and affection that made Hyun's heart feel full for the first time in years. Their secret meetings continued, but Hyun had to become more creative as Spark grew larger and more active. The dragon now barely fit in its glass case, and it had started making louder sounds when it was happy or excited. Hyun began bringing books from the station's library, reading to Spark in Korean and Valdorian. The dragon seemed to enjoy stories, especially ones about adventure and friendship. Sometimes Hyun would tell Spark about Earth, about blue skies and green forests, and the dragon would share images of its own homeworld in return. But their growing bond also brought new dangers. Hyun's supervisor, Park Min-ho, was asking more questions about why his cleaning schedule had changed. "You're spending too much time in the Imperial Wing," Min-ho warned him one evening. "The efficiency reports are getting attention from management. They want to know why you're taking so long in areas that should be quick to clean." Hyun tried to look unconcerned. "I'm just being extra careful. You know how the nobles complain if they find even a speck of dust?" Min-ho studied his face. "Is there something you're not telling me? We've worked together for 3 years, Hyun." "I know when you're hiding something." Before Hyun could answer, another cleaner joined them. Choi So-young was one of the few humans who worked in engineering instead of basic cleaning. She was smart and observant, and Hyun had always been a little afraid of her sharp eyes. "What are you two whispering about?" she asked, checking her equipment. "Hyun's been acting strange lately," Minho said. "Taking longer in the upper levels, always tired during break time." So-young looked at Hyun with interest. "Strange how?" "It's nothing," Hyun said quickly. "Just trying to do a good job." But So-young continued to study him. "You know, I've been getting some interesting readings from the environmental sensors in the Imperial Wing. Energy signatures that don't match any of the known equipment up there." Hyun's blood went cold, but he tried to keep his expression neutral. "Energy signatures can come from anywhere," he said. "True," So-young agreed. "But these are organic signatures, like something alive that wasn't there before." She paused. "Something that's been growing." Minho looked between them, confused. "What are you talking about?" So-young kept her eyes on Hyun. "I think our friend here has discovered something in the Imperial Wing, something he doesn't want anyone to know about." Hyun felt trapped. Through his bond with Spark, he could sense the dragon's worry. Even though they were floors apart, Spark could feel his distress. "I don't know what you mean," Hyun said weakly. So-young smiled, but it wasn't a mean smile. "Relax, Hyun. I'm not going to report you, but I am curious. What could be in the Emperor's quarters that would make a careful man like you risk his job?" Minho looked worried now. "Hyun, please tell me you haven't been stealing. They execute humans for theft." "I haven't stolen anything," Hyun said quickly, and that was true. He had only given things to Spark, never taken anything away. So-young tilted her head. "But you have been helping something, or someone." Hyun realized he had a choice to make. He could continue lying and hope they lost interest, or he could trust them with the truth. Through his bond with Spark, he felt the dragon's opinion, a warm feeling of trust, as if Spark was telling him that these people could be friends too. "If I tell you something," Hyun said slowly, "will you promise to keep it secret?" Minho and So-young exchanged glances. "How secret?" Minho asked nervously. "The kind of secret that could get us all thrown off the station," Hyun admitted. So-young's eyes lit up with interest. "Now you definitely have to tell us." Hyun took a deep breath. "There's something in the Emperor's private quarters. Something alive. Something that was dying until I started taking care of it." "What kind of something?" So-young asked. Hyun looked around to make sure no one else could hear them. "A dragon," he whispered. "A baby dragon. And it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Minho and So-young stared at Hyun like he had grown a second head. "A dragon?" Minho whispered, his voice squeaking. "You've been sneaking into the Emperor's rooms to play with a dragon?" "I wasn't playing," Hyun said defensively. "It was dying. Someone had to help it." So-young leaned forward, her eyes bright with curiosity. "A real dragon? I've only seen them in old texts. They're supposed to be incredibly rare." "This one is real, and it's amazing," Hyun said, feeling Spark's contentment. Through their bond, the dragon was probably sleeping now, curled up in the warm blanket Hyun had brought from his own quarters. "It's intelligent, maybe more intelligent than we are. And it was completely alone." "Hyun," Minho said seriously, "if they catch you, they won't just fire you. The Emperor doesn't forgive people who touch his private things." "I know the risk," Hyun replied, "but I can't abandon Spark now." "Spark?" So-young asked. "That's what I named the dragon." So-young was quiet for a moment, then made a decision. "I want to see it." "Absolutely not," Minho said immediately. "Bad enough that Hyun is risking his life. We're not all going to get executed for playing with the Emperor's pet." "It's not a pet," Hyun said firmly. "Spark is a person, just not a human person." Over the next few nights, So-young kept asking questions about Spark. She wanted to know everything. What the dragon looked like, how big it was, what it ate, how Hyun communicated with it. Her engineering mind was fascinated by the idea of a telepathic connection between different species. Finally, Hyun agreed to let her meet Spark, but only for a few minutes. The night So Young came with him to the Imperial Wing, Hyun was nervous. Through their bond, he could feel that Spark was excited about meeting someone new, but Hyun worried about bringing another person into their secret. When they entered the forbidden room, Spark was waiting by the open glass case, now far too small, to contain the dragon's growing body. Spark had become beautiful, about the size of a large dog with scales that shifted color in the light and wings that could actually lift the dragon a few inches off the ground. So Young gasped when she saw Spark. "Oh, Hyun," she breathed. "It's magnificent." Spark looked at the new human with curiosity. Through their bond, Hyun felt the dragon's interest and caution. Spark trusted Hyun's judgment, but wanted to learn about this newcomer. "Hello, beautiful one," So Young said softly, kneeling down. "I'm a friend of Hyun's." Spark moved closer and sniffed her hand, then made a soft, chirping sound that Hyun had learned meant approval. "It likes me," So Young said with wonder. "Spark is very good at judging character," Hyun said, and felt the dragon's agreement through their bond. So Young spent an hour with them, asking careful questions and observing how Hyun and Spark interacted. She was amazed by their obvious connection and impressed by Spark's intelligence. "The dragon understands every word we're saying," she said as they prepared to leave. "In 3 languages," Hyun confirmed. "Spark learns very quickly." As they were getting ready to go, So Young made an offer that surprised Hyun. "I can help," she said. "I have access to better food supplies through the engineering department, and I can monitor the security schedules to make sure you don't get caught." Hyun felt a wave of gratitude that came from both himself and Spark. With So Young's help, their secret visits became easier and safer. She brought high-quality protein supplements that helped Spark grow strong and healthy. She also created a schedule that let Hyun spend more time with the dragon without raising suspicion from the supervisors. But their luck couldn't last forever. One night, almost 2 months after Hyun's first visit to Spark, everything went wrong. Hyun was in the dragon's room, reading aloud from a book about Earth's history. Spark was curled up next to him, listening with the intense focus that dragons brought to learning new things. The dragon was now too big for the glass case entirely, and had claimed a corner of the room as its sleeping area. Suddenly, Spark's head shot up, and the dragon made a sound Hyun had never heard before, a low, warning growl. Through their bond, Hyun felt Spark's alarm. Someone was coming, someone important. Hyun quickly stood up, his heart pounding. There was nowhere to hide in the circular room, and Spark was far too big to fit back in the glass case even if there had been time. 2. Door slid open and Emperor Kang Woo-jin walked in. The Emperor stopped in the doorway, his silver eyes wide with shock. He stared at Hyun, then at Spark, then back at Hyun. For a moment, no one moved. The Emperor was not what Hyun had expected up close. He was tall like other Valdorians, but his blue skin was lighter, almost gray. His features were sharper, more angular than the other nobles Hyun had seen, and his eyes, those silver eyes, held an intelligence that was calculating and cold. "What?" the Emperor said slowly, his voice deadly quiet. "Is a human doing in my private chamber?" Hyun's mouth went dry. He could feel Spark's protective anger through their bond, but he sent calming thoughts to the dragon. The last thing they needed was for Spark to attack the Emperor. "I can explain, Your Majesty," Hyun managed to say. "You can explain why you broke into my quarters? Why you're touching my property?" The Emperor's voice rose with each word. "Spark isn't property," Hyun said before he could stop himself. "Spark is a living being who was dying from loneliness." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "Spark? That's what I named the dragon, Your Majesty. When I found Spark 2 months ago, the dragon was barely alive." The Emperor looked at the healthy, vibrant dragon that now stood protectively next to Hyun. Spark had grown magnificent under Hyun's care, scales bright with health, eyes alert and intelligent, wings strong enough for short flights around the room. This creature was a gift from the Nexus ambassador, the Emperor said slowly. It was supposed to be the rarest pet in the galaxy. Spark was dying in that glass cage, Hyun said, finding his courage. Dragons need companionship. They need someone to care about them. They can't survive on food pellets in isolation. The Emperor stared at him. And you, a human cleaner, somehow knew this? I knew that no living thing should suffer alone, Hyun replied. Before the Emperor could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed from the outer chamber. More people were coming. General Dartek entered the room, followed by two other high-ranking Valdorian nobles. They all stopped when they saw the scene. The human cleaner standing next to the Emperor's dragon like they belonged together. Your Majesty, General Dartek said, his voice hard. What is this human doing here? Apparently, the Emperor said, slowly, never taking his eyes off Hyun and Spark. This human has been caring for my dragon. One of the other nobles, Admiral Veltar, stepped forward. A human has contaminated your prize dragon. This is intolerable. The creature should be destroyed immediately, General Dartek declared, and the human should be executed for theft and trespassing. Spark let out a low growl at the word destroyed and moved even closer to Hyun. Through their bond, Hyun felt the dragon's fierce loyalty and determination to protect him, just as he had protected Spark. No one is destroying anything, the Emperor said quietly, but there was something strange in his voice, something that sounded almost like wonder. He was staring at Hyun and Spark with an expression that was hard to read. The anger was still there, but it was mixed with something else. Confusion, perhaps, or recognition. Your Majesty, Admiral Veltar said impatiently, the human has overstepped every boundary. The penalty for this level of disobedience is death. The Emperor continued to study Hyun's face. Tell me, human, he said slowly. Why did you risk everything for a creature you had never seen before? Hyun looked into those silver eyes and saw something he hadn't expected. Pain. Hidden but real, like an old wound that had never healed properly. Because no one deserves to die alone, Hyun said simply, and because Spark needed someone to care. The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised everyone in the room. I have never seen the dragon look so healthy. The room fell silent except for the soft sound of Spark's breathing. The dragon was pressed against Hyun's side, and through their bond, Hyun could feel Spark's confusion and fear. The dragon didn't understand why so many people were angry, but it could sense the danger in the air. General Dartek stepped forward, his hand moving to the weapon at his side. Your Majesty, this human has committed serious crimes. We should end this now. Wait, the Emperor said, holding up a hand. His silver eyes were still fixed on Hyun and Spark. I want to understand something first. He moved closer, and Spark tensed, ready to defend Hyun if necessary. But the Emperor stopped a few feet away and knelt down so he was at the dragon's eye level. Dragon, he said formally, speaking in the ancient Valdorian language used for ceremonies. I am your master. Come to me. Spark looked at the Emperor, then back at Hyun. Through their bond, Hyun felt the dragon's reluctance and confusion. Go ahead, Hyun whispered to Spark. It's okay. But Spark didn't move toward the Emperor. Instead, the dragon made a soft, questioning sound and stayed firmly planted next to Hyun. The Emperor tried again, this time in common galactic. Dragon, I command you to come here. Again, Spark ignored him. The dragon's attention was focused entirely on Hyun, waiting for guidance from the person it trusted. Admiral Veltar made a disgusted sound. The creature has been corrupted by human contact. It no longer recognizes proper authority. Actually, the Emperor said slowly, standing up, I think it recognizes something else entirely. He was quiet for a moment, studying the obvious bond between Hyun and Spark. Then he did something that shocked everyone in the room. He placed his hand over his heart and spoke in perfect Korean. I understand what it means to be alone, he said, looking directly at Hyun. I have been alone my entire life. Hyun stared at the Emperor in amazement. Not only was the Emperor speaking Korean, but he was speaking it with the accent of someone who had learned it as a child. General Dartek looked confused. Your Majesty, what language is that? The Emperor turned to face his advisors, and for the first time, Hyun saw something new in those silver eyes. Defiance. It's Korean, the Emperor said clearly. The language of my mother. The silence that followed was so complete that Hyun could hear his own heartbeat. Admiral Veltar's mouth fell open. General Dartek looked like he had been struck by lightning. Your mother? Admiral Veltar whispered. But your mother was Valdorian nobility. Lady Shiran of the Northern Territories. Lady Shiran raised me, the Emperor corrected. But she was not my birth mother. My birth mother was a human woman, named Kim Min-jung. She was a translator in the diplomatic corps. The revelation hit the room like a bomb. Hyun felt Spark's amazement through their bond. The dragon had sensed something familiar about the Emperor but hadn't been able to identify what it was. That's impossible, General Dartek said, but his voice was weak with shock. My father had an affair with a human woman, the Emperor continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. When she became pregnant, the scandal had to be hidden. I was taken from her when I was 3 years old and given to Lady Shiran to raise as her own son. My human heritage has been a secret for 35 years. He looked back at Hyun and Spark. But watching this human care for a dying dragon, seeing the bond they've formed, it reminds me of something I've tried to forget. It reminds me that being human isn't a weakness to be ashamed of. Admiral Veltar found his voice. Your Majesty, surely you don't mean to suggest that this changes anything. You are the Emperor of the Valdorian Empire. Your bloodline is what matters, not your origins. My origins, the Emperor said firmly, are exactly what matters. He turned back to Hyun. Tell me, what is your name? Lee Hyun, Your Majesty. Lee Hyun, the Emperor repeated, pronouncing it perfectly. My mother's name was Kim Min-jung. Do you know what that means in Korean? Bright and righteous, Hyun answered, surprised by the question. She chose that name for herself when she joined the diplomatic corps. She said she wanted to bring light to dark places. The Emperor's voice grew soft. I think she would have approved of what you've done here. Suddenly, Spark moved forward. The dragon approached the Emperor slowly, cautiously, but without fear. When Spark was close enough, the dragon sniffed the Emperor's hand, then made a soft, welcoming sound. Through their bond, Hyun felt Spark's recognition. The dragon could sense the human part of the Emperor's nature, the part that had been hidden and denied for so long. The dragon accepts you, Hyun said with wonder. Spark can feel that you're part human, too. The Emperor reached out slowly and touched Spark's head. The dragon leaned into the touch, purring softly. Dragons can sense the true nature of people, the Emperor said quietly. I had forgotten that. I had forgotten many things about what I really am. General Dartek stepped forward angrily. Your Majesty, this is madness. You cannot reveal your mixed heritage. The Noble Council will never accept a half-human emperor. Then perhaps, the Emperor said, standing to his full height. It's time the Noble Council learned something about the value of humans. He looked around the room at his advisors' shocked faces, then back at Hyun and Spark. Lee Hyun, he said formally, you have done something that all the advanced science and technology of the Valdorian Empire could not do. You saved a dying dragon through simple compassion and understanding. You formed a bond that our greatest scholars said was impossible. The Emperor paused, then smiled, the first genuine smile Hyun had ever seen on his face. I name you Guardian of the Imperial Dragon and grant you the rank of Noble Companion. You will be responsible for Spark's care and well-being, with all the authority and protection that position requires. Admiral Veltar gasped. A human, given noble rank? This is unprecedented. Many things about today are unprecedented, the Emperor replied calmly. I'm half-human. My dragon prefers human companionship to Valdorian authority, and I've just realized that the species we've treated as inferior might actually have gifts we lack. He looked at Hyun seriously. Will you accept this position? It won't be easy. Many people will resent a human holding noble rank. Hyun felt Spark's excitement and encouragement through their bond. The dragon wanted them to stay together, wanted to make their friendship official and permanent. I accept, Your Majesty, Hyun said. But I have one condition. The Emperor raised an eyebrow. A human cleaner is making conditions with the Emperor. My friends Park Minho and Choi So-young helped me care for Spark. If I'm to be guardian of the Imperial Dragon, I want them as my assistants. They've earned the right to be part of this. The Emperor considered this, then nodded. Agreed. They'll be given appropriate ranks and quarters. General Dartek looked like he was about to have a breakdown. Your Majesty, the implications of this decision— The implications, the Emperor interrupted, are that the Valdorian Empire is about to learn that strength comes in many forms, that intelligence and compassion are not weaknesses, and that sometimes the greatest wisdom comes from the most unexpected sources. He reached out and gently stroked Spark's scales. The dragon purred happily, finally having both of the people it cared about in the same place. Besides, the Emperor added with another smile, I have a feeling that Spark is going to grow up to be quite magnificent, and when people see a dragon that chose to bond with humans rather than Valdorians, they might start asking some interesting questions about what humans are really capable of. Through their bond, Hyun felt Spark's contentment and excitement. The dragon was happy, truly happy, for the first time since being taken from its home world, and for the first time in 3 years, Lee Hyun felt like he belonged somewhere. Not as an invisible cleaner, but as someone important. Someone with a friend who would never abandon him, and a purpose that meant something. The Emperor had been right about one thing. People would definitely start asking questions. But Hyun was ready for those questions, and with Spark by his side, he was ready for whatever came next. After all, he had learned something important in the past 2 months. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness could change everything. Sometimes caring for someone who needed help could reveal truths that changed the galaxy. And sometimes being human was exactly the right thing to be.